Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar of 2022, Managing the Chaos, the case for the food service incident management in the restaurant. I'm super excited and delighted to have two wonderful folks from Zaxby's, along with our Chief Product Officer, Steve Miller and Michelle Stevens. So welcome, guys. Welcome to our webinar today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
So why don't we get started with a quick round of introductions for our audience to get to know you a little bit better, not just the professional side, but I get to know you as a person. Let's start with Steve. So Steve, tell us a little bit about what got you into the industry, and tell us something that is unlikely for someone to, glean by looking at your LinkedIn, for example.
Well, I got in the industry, my father was actually in food service distribution. Quite honestly, I told myself over the years I would never do that, but found myself at the age of about 28 or 29 going to work for a distributor in the South and as a street rep. And that went fairly well. And a few years later, I got an invitation to join another company on a national account basis. This is 1995. And wasn't there 2 months, and these three guys came in with this chicken concept called Zaxby's. They had 9 restaurants. I think they were about 4 different states. So I became their distributor partner, their distributor guy for the next 10 years. I actually stayed in the distribution industry on that side of it for up until about 7 years ago, when the CEO at the time, or COO at the time, said, "Hey, you ready to put the hat on?" I said, "Absolutely." So for the last 7 years, I've been wearing the Zaxby's hat, and those 9 restaurants are over 900 restaurants. So
fantastic,
amazing journey, and we still got a long way to go.
Fantastic! What a amazing story. And now over to you, Michelle. So tell us a little bit about how long you've been in the industry, what your journey has been like, and something I know a fact about you that I'm going to share with the audience, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself with that.
My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm the distribution coordinator here at Zaxby's. I've been with Zaxby's for a little over a year, and I've been in distribution for just over 4. And the adventure that became my introduction to Zaxby's was the issue with COVID, and my application process took me a year to be able to join this wonderful company. So
wow, that's yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about COVID and the impact on supply chain in a second, but before we do that, Michelle, there's a unique fact that you have about yourself that's that I found pretty amazing, right? So you have 4 grandkids, you said?
I do.
Oh my God, that is amazing. So I can tell you, I can vouch for everybody who's listening that they are watching here, that seems amazing. So whatever you do is working. I'm sure people are going to reach out to you and say, please tell me the secret of how you actually are like this, right? Can you sell it in the bottle somewhere? So that's going to come to you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to our very own Bill Michalski. Bill, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what got you into this space.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Michalski, Chief Product Officer at ArrowStream. I've not accomplished anything nearly as impressive as 4 grandchildren. I want to kind of lay that groundwork. But been in supply chain technology for over 20 years, about 15 of those in food service. Although my introduction to food service really began when I was about 16, and I was hired to make ice cream in the back of an ice cream parlor. Did that for a couple of years. Had a habit of experimenting a lot with flavors that no one would ever buy. And so I think I needed to wait another 20 years or so to come back before I'd be allowed back in the industry after some of those disasters, but I'm happy to be back in it.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Bill. We're lucky to have you here. My name is Raj Badrinath, guys. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer. I joined the company just in November, and my God, I will tell you, I've been so impressed with the people, not only at ArrowStream, but some of our customers, Steve and Michelle being obviously one of them here. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation between Bill, Steve, Michelle, and myself. The format that you guys can expect today is it's going to be a lot more casual. We're going to have a conversation. We have a set of slides for sure, but we're going to use that as guiding points. And really to remember, when you're on the call, is please use your Q&A section and make it interactive. Give us the questions. I will toss them to Steve, Michelle, or Bill, as the case may be. And we want to make sure that we are answering your questions of what you have. So let's set the frame. Let's keep moving with this. And let's start at the macro. So if you can go to the next slide, let me invite Bill over and just to give us a high-level overview of what's happening in the market, and we'll kick things off. Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Raj. And I want to extend my thanks as well to Michelle and Steve for joining me here. So let's start with a check-in on the state of affairs in the restaurant industry, and do it quickly because, frankly, unless you've been avoiding the news for 2 years, you know that we've got a bit of a supply crisis going on these days. It's been impacting all levels of the supply chain, labor shortages in particular, from food production to warehouse employees to delivery drivers to restaurant staff. It truly has been a mess. Saw last week the American Trucking Association has us now at an 80,000 driver shortage nationally, which is a record and apparently 30% above what that level was pre-pandemic. So it is literally impacting everything. So I think where I'd start is invite Steve and Michelle to reflect on whether they're seeing the same at Zaxby's and how that's coming to light day to day in your organization.
So, I think the first question right now, Steve, is like, look, we know about the supply chain disruptions and labor shortages that you've seen over here, and there's been, supply chain teams have really shown some heroic effort in sort of making this work with the constraints that we currently have. And you can see from our data as well, from our platform, on what's happening with the impact of supply. What are you seeing at Zaxby's, Steve? Is it the same trends? What's your perspective there?
It is. Every day it seems like we're tackling a new supply shortage. We're tackling whether we can get PO appointments into a cold storage that's holding 40 loads of French fries a week. I mean, every day is a new challenge. We've really are relying ever more so on the data that we're able to put together and trying to be as proactive as possible. It seems like initially it was reacting to outages. Now we're trying to catch them before they become outages, and you can't stop them all. I mean, there's just, everybody on this call knows we're just dealing with a mountain of issues, and they change from a supplier standpoint to a truck standpoint, just multiple different ways. But trying to stay ahead and then being able to communicate challenges, shortages to our restaurants prior to the truck ever coming and making a delivery. So everybody's not chasing their tail and going, why didn't I get this?
Yeah. So, I'm curious, I see, we work with you, with other customers every day, trying to tackle this upstream, working with suppliers, working with distributors. In preparing for this conversation, I was curious to see, what is filtering it through to the restaurant? What's the experience that they're seeing? And that, when you look at the graph on the screen, so a lot of what we'll talk about today is tracking of incidents when it comes to deliveries to the restaurant. And we've run some numbers, and you can see that over the last few months, we've jumped from the percent of those incidents being logged by restaurants that are short shipments is now over 50% regularly, whereas pre-pandemic and even in the first few months after it started, it was around 20 to 23%. Are you seeing that as well in the four walls of the restaurant?
We are. It seemed like we hit about March or April, and that's when the labor situation very quickly, I'll use the word critical. It started to get critical stages at the distribution centers, and then we dealt with a lot of tough stuff that in 30 years of distribution, I've never dealt with so many delayed trucks. But long story short, they're showing some recovery, but the issue is still labor, and it's trained labor. So it's still very much a people business. So there's mistakes are going to happen. So they're faced just like our stores are. It's labor. It's adapting a little bit, but are we at the same service levels we were at back in Q1 of 2021? No, we're not there. That's a reality.
So would you say that when it comes to supply disruption, that the experience of the restaurant staff is less so products running out of stock at the distributor because you're staying ahead of that, and more so issues with delivery related to labor crisis?
Yeah, that's correct. Essentially, it's my truck shows up and it's on my invoice, but it didn't get delivered. That's easily number one. Obviously, there's damaged product. Everybody knows Zaxby's for chicken. We have to, and we want our stores' feedback on the quality of product that's getting delivered from our distributors that's coming from a multitude of different suppliers and plants. So, but they're short-staffed too. So we need to try and find a way to make the communication of these problems as simple as possible, because quite frankly, they're walking in the door and they're hoping, they're praying that they got enough people to keep their restaurant open, and are they going to be able to open the dining room? So we try and be as non-invasive in their world as possible, which means a little interruption at their back door when they're receiving their key drop from the night before.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's turn away from the restaurant a little more toward your team managing distribution. We can go to the next visual here. The data that we pulled is showing that whereas at the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about where can I find gloves and hand sanitizer and takeout containers, the types of issues we're seeing now are spanning the full spectrum of products and getting pretty unpredictable. Is that what you're seeing as well? And if so, how are you handling that unpredictability?
I think unpredictable is the perfect word, Bill. I mean, right now, if I could pick two categories that are giving us the biggest challenges, it's disposables, which have been kind of tough all the way along, but they've gotten really difficult, and we're big sauces. So we've had some challenge in the sauces area. The chicken piece was extremely difficult this summer, maybe a little bit better. But again, it is about trying to stay ahead of potential shortages as much as we can. We're trying to use a lot more PO data. That missing PO is never been a problem like it is today, and trying to figure out why it didn't get picked up is secondary compared to knowing we got to know it did not make it to the DC, because sometimes we don't always hear that from our distribution centers, because it's not just Zaxby's they're dealing with. I mean, I got to say, hands off to them, our distributor partners, anybody in distributor business, because it's just not your brand that they're dealing with. They're dealing with this with everything that they've got. I don't think there's any supplier out there that's not having some sort of freight issue, or we're having our own freight issues. So anyway, it's very rough right now. I'll just put it that way. It's not getting any easier in 2022.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Which is one thing that I wanted to sort of ask Steve to look into the crystal ball and really talk about this, right? So in your mind, Steve, right? So when is this thing getting over? When is this thing getting back to normal in your mind, if you had a crystal ball?
The crystal ball, God, that word normal, what is that? I don't even know how to spell it anymore, I don't think. Maybe the back half of this year. It's so hard to tell. But I'm quoting more of the experts, but it is how we get caught up where the freight in piece is caught up and supply side gets caught up. I think that's still the big question is, what's it going to take to get back to, I'll call it break even. But right now our just in time supply chain world, no matter what industry you're in, it's hurting. It's not very just in time in some cases.
Perfect. And for our listeners, viewers right now, I think it'll be really good if you guys can chime in with where you're seeing it as well. And, you know, I'm going to happy to relate it to Steve and Bill and to Michelle as well, just as a quick note. Bill, you had another question?
Yeah, so, you know, I think what I'd like to do is switch gears a little bit here. I mean, we know that Zaxby's been leveraging a few different areas of our technology to tackle some of these issues, and one of those arenas is in the restaurant itself, and that's the one we wanted to focus on today. So what I'd like to do is take a few moments just to introduce folks on the call to what that solution is, for those who haven't seen it before, and then turn hopefully pretty quickly back to talking with Steve and Michelle about how they're using it today. Because I think that, you know, in the end, there's pretty broad awareness of the problems that we're all facing in this industry, and so I want to make sure we're sharing with people best practices wherever we can on how to resolve those issues. So the solution that we're talking about here today is called Foodservice Incident Management. The point of this product is to capture and drive to corrective action on product and product delivery issues that are occurring when ingredients are received at the back of the restaurant. The purpose of this is to create process diligence across your supply chain. So not just in the restaurant, but with your distribution partners, your supplier partners, at the corporate team level as well, to identify these issues and get ahead of them before they become more severe, before they become more widespread and more customer impacting. The idea is to get into a position to measure performance, drive accountability across your partners for handling these incidents that occur, whether it's damaged product, whether it's late deliveries, whether it's a food safety issue. This is also about saving time in the back of the restaurant. So without the ability to capture and track these incidents in an automated way, your restaurant employees wind up spending a lot of time on the phone, in email, chasing down their partners to try to make sure that they're getting replacement product, they're getting the credit that they were promised, and solving the overall issue. So this solution has been in use for a few years by quite a number of our customers. We've got over 14,000 restaurants at this point that are using this to track incidents, and it's really a broad range. Some of you on the call who are familiar with our solutions have known this product by a different name, Quality Incident Management, or QIM. And so there may be in the last couple of minutes a moment of confusion there. We are formally changing the name of the product to FSIM, Foodservice Incident Management. And the reason why is that the usage of this product has gone much broader than just quality issues. So yes, you know, people are tracking external damage, internal damage, spoilage, expiration, temp issues, all the things that impact quality. But as you saw at the front end, tracking of short shipments has become a primary activity in this tool set, as well as tracking mispicks and service issues during drop-off of product. So we want to change the name to reflect the true usage of the product and the true value that it's driving for people. So a quick note on how it works, and then we'll jump back into the conversation. I show the next visual here. Great. So there are four basic elements here that are important to getting on top of these sorts of issues. One is it's got to be very rapid in terms of the capture and logging of those incidents at the restaurant. As we've already said, the staff doesn't have time to spend in doing a lot of data entry. So this has to be about making a couple of selections, snapping a picture, hitting submit, and then letting your supply chain take care of the rest. That means that it needs to be hooked into good data. And so this is entirely hooked into our platform. So people can use a phone, tablet, PC, but it's all integrated with ArrowStream data so that we know what restaurant it is, we know the distribution partner, we know the products that you've purchased, and we know the recent invoices. So there's really nothing to enter, just select a few things. Second, once it's submitted, the workflow needs to work automatically and really leverage this connected network of partners. So chains are setting up the workflow that they desire. It can be different based on how you want your process to run. It can also differ by incident type, whether it's routed to the distributor first, to the supplier, or to a corporate centralized team. They're notified, they get a quick link, they can respond to the issue, they can accept responsibility, commit to corrective action, whether that's replacing the product or the credit. And then we're tracking the aging of those incidents. So none of them fall through the cracks, which is really what happens if you don't have a system like this, is the phone call gets made, but no one follows up and it just kind of drifts off into the ether. On the back end of this, and this is where some of the real power comes to play, is tracking those results. So not just tracking what's received in terms of credits against what was promised, and we can do that because we have the invoice feeds behind the scenes, but also measuring what's happening, getting ahead of these issues. If you've got a particular supplier where there are issues occurring and popping up at multiple locations across your network, that's something you want to get ahead of quickly and be able to have the data, have a fact-driven conversation with that partner, and set up scorecarding that can ensure that your supply chain is working well on your behalf. So we're very excited about this solution. It's something that truly leverages what ArrowStream brings to the table in terms of our data network, and also all of the different parties that at this point are now a part of our solution. Hundreds of distributors, hundreds of suppliers are a part of this today, and all taking action on these incidents. So I'll stop my summary of the solution, jump back into life at Zaxby's, where I'd love to hear some more about how that implementation has been working there. So Zaxby's implemented it in 2019. Steve, maybe you could cover a little bit about the scope of how you're using it there, the teams, the types of incidents.
Today, for all 900 restaurants, if they have an out-of-stock problem, or I should say a short on truck, if they have a damaged product, if they 2 days later get into a case of chicken and there's some chicken feed in them, everything goes into the stores, all enter into the FSIM. I want to say QIM, FSIM tool, and that is how we handle all these type incidents. Now, that doesn't mean that if there's an emergency situation, we want them to call their distributor or call us if it's an emergency. But it's largely handling, probably 95% or more are now channeled through FSIM.
That's great. And in terms of at the corporate level, it sounds like you have multiple teams who are attached to some of these incidents that occur. So how does that break down?
Well, I'd say our distributors, there's probably 75% to 80 go to the distributor. Is that incident? I'll use the simple short on truck. Store comes in, their key drop there is it's been made. They check it in. They're short a case of French fries. They go into FSIM, they enter it, and that immediately goes to the distributor. So say this 8 o'clock in the morning, it's going to them. We have visibility. This is Michelle. This is kind of what she does on a daily basis. And at that point, a lot of times maybe they're checking their scan report, and maybe the first thing to see if it was scanned to delivery. But they're either accepting it, which happens majority of the time, or they're declining it and maybe saying, hey, the driver scanned this. Can you look for a mispick? At that point, the store also has visibility to this, I'll call it conversation that's going on within FSIM. And if they say, no, we didn't find anything, any mispick, then most cases the distributor accepts it and boom, it moves into credit process.
So one question from the audience, and this from Jason to Steve. How have the distributors' response been with this tool? Seems like this also makes things easier for them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Raj, because some have accepted it we have 8 distribution centers. We've been with one particular distributor for 25 years. So there was a big change, a big culture change where we've got that customer service rep that's been cradling stores for years and years. At first, there was maybe a little pushback, only because they were unfamiliar with it. But the acceptance level now it's great. I mean, it has shortened up their life, and it allows that customer service rep to focus on more urgent issues and not just be fielding phone calls that are just basically she's pushing paper or he's pushing paper. Hopefully I answered the question.
Would you say in general it's allowed people to respond faster to incidents?
I think yes, in that it's live. So essentially what we've moved away from is somebody shorted something, they're sending an email, they're calling the customer service rep, they're creating email chains, they're leaving voicemails, and then up to the process of knowing that it's been, hey, I got it, and credit's going to be issued. There's a lot of different places to look, and probably even worse, there was no way to track any of that kind of information. So, but there's some accountability on the distributor side in that if they're not responding to incidents, Michelle's seeing this. The incident gets put in today, it's tomorrow, so it's 1 day old, and when it goes from day 6 to day 7, it hits the yellow zone, so it's getting heightened. So they've got to be able to keep up with it, and that's probably, it's something we never had visibility before. Maybe we never knew how many these type issues got pushed, but.
I think, the one thing just to ask Michelle this question, right? So Michelle, so how do you monitor FSIM on a daily basis?
I log into FSIM every morning. I check each DC to see how many incidents are waiting, see how many incidents are under each different area that we have them submit for, look into how old the incidents are, and then decide if arbitration is needed and contact either the store or the DC to see what they need or want to get this incident resolved. So every day I use the information to sort of focus down what needs to be accomplished that day, and having the information all right there makes it so much easier. Like Steve was saying, going back and forth makes it very difficult, especially when you're having to wait repeatedly. Since I can immediately contact the DC or the store, then I'll know more exactly what information they're wanting or needing. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. So when I think of, beyond just the individual incident level to the overall relationship with your partners, what are some of the key metrics that you're keeping an eye on as you're looking at their performance?
Yeah. On a simplest level, like for instance, with the distribution centers, Michelle does a small group of reports on a weekly basis based on the FSIM data. And I'll look at and see, or look at a distribution center and say, well, based on the number of stores, how many incidents occurred at the number of stores that they have as a percentage? So I'll use last week as an example. We have a very high performing distribution center. 5% of their stores put in an incident inside FSIM. That's very strong. And another distributor that has struggled a lot more, 40% of our stores had some sort of incident, be it quality, delivery, a variety of different things. So that it gives me a very quick 30,000-foot view of what's going on at the DCs. And I'll look at this as I look at it over a period of time. And if that, say that DC it's at 40% last week, was at 20% 4 weeks ago, well, we got something that's going sideways here. So, that's when you get on the phone and you start talking to people. And that's when you find out, they just had 10 selectors quit or something like that.
Yeah. Great.
Makes sense. One question from the audience then to Steve was, what have you done, and this is from Gary, what have you done to address shortages, adding suppliers, streamlined approval process to be able to react faster?
Oh, God, that's a great question. We've added a few new suppliers. Quite honestly, we would like to add more, but the capacity inside the industry is so tight You know, there's only so many people that make cups. I'll use that. That seems to be highlighted a lot these days for a lot of chains. We're relying a little bit more on distributor inventory than probably we ever have. We've typically always been a 99.5% of our product is proprietary. So in a jam situation, that's what we're trying to do. But that's a great question, and thus far, and I'm the distribution guy, I'm not the purchasing guy, but I know our distribution guy has been his team has been all over it. So there's probably other stuff working that I'm not naming.
No, for sure. And I think this is another question, Steve, which is similar to the last one in one sense, right? So are you having to use more decentralized sourcing strategies in order to protect continuity of supply and reduce exposure in transit? And maybe the second one is much more appropriate here. How does increased data visibility help you strategically?
I think the second question is big in everything that we're doing. You know, with access to, they're in a few buckets that we're on all day, every day. It seems like is what is on-hand inventory, what's our sales look like from yesterday, from last week, from 3 weeks ago, what's our PO inventory or inbound PO data look like, and then knowing, and I kind of said this earlier, but knowing what's going to be a problem before it has become the problem. To help with some of the outages with 8 distribution centers, we have moved so much product around from one distribution center to another. But because we have this on-hand data and we have the usage data, we're able to rob Peter and pay Paul without potentially doing damage to help plug some of the holes and spread around inventory as best as possible. We've got a pretty active freight side on the logistics side as well too, and that's where the PO data comes in. We're just having to, when a PO gets missed, they're a lot more critical than what they used to be, because you can't depend on the one right behind it actually showing up. And again, there's another area to identify trends. If you miss one or two, we got a big problem. We got to figure out where it's at: supply, truck, appointments, whatever.
Got it. And one more, which is kind of a bit more of a leading question here, right? From one of the audience members, from Liz here. Has this helped you identify that, or I would say, which of your suppliers are having issues?
Yes, it's actually our QA team, which again, I'm not the subject matter expert, but we all work closely together, and everything in one form or another seems to flow around the distribution center. But for our QA team, it's become a big deal, especially with chicken and our multiple suppliers. You know, we're able to roll up reports and based on the number of incidents put inside of ArrowStream, identify who our supplier challenges are or where they're at and with what products they're with. So, and then the QA team has just this single area to go to when they want to go and run, say they're getting ready to do an evaluation on a chicken plant. Well, they can jump into ArrowStream and say, all right, what are the stores? What kind of incidents have we had? And then the suppliers themselves actually do the responding. And the tool allows stores to put in a picture of the supplier label, of the distributor label. So there's a lot of information that gets gleaned fairly quick, where we know pretty fast down to what lot number it came out of, without a whole lot of emails and phone calls.
Fantastic. Perfect. Thank you. I think that's so keep the questions coming, guys. I think this is wonderful. As you can see, Steve and Michelle have been super generous with their answers. Keep going, Bill.
Yeah, sure. So let's flip to some key takeaways. And I think there've been a ton in what you've been saying already. But next slide, please. Steve and Michelle, if you could summarize for the group, for companies that are looking to implement a solution like this or a process like this, what some of your recommendations might be.
I guess I'll take it first, but if you're a company that's struggling with, not struggling, but you want to know the detail behind the problems, I think that's where FSIM has allowed us to look inside. I'll use the example, and Michelle, you can help elaborate, but like a key drop. The first thing that comes to mind is, hey, did the truck arrive? But Michelle, if you want to share some of the metrics we're able to gather around a key drop now.
Yeah, we have several different type of key drop issues, such as the temperature on the invoice, which is an important piece of information, not only for the store, but if they happen to get audited, if the alarm was set upon the driver leaving, if any of the product happened to be stored improperly, even damage due to the driver or to one of the facilities. But we're able to actually access all of those pieces of information individually through ArrowStream. So it makes it a lot easier to pull reports and see exactly where the issues are coming in. And that makes it easier for us to contact the DC, or even for the DC to be able to use to contact specific drivers if it's all in a central location. So the information really is very helpful.
That's great, thanks. And you can see, I think, on screen here some of the incident types that you're tracking today. Is that list something you continue to evaluate over time as new types of issues occur?
Yes, and we adjust some of them. We have adjusted several times with you for areas that were maybe too broad to focus them down, because it is something that we need to know specifically what, like the key drop issue. And then truck issues used to just be a general area. So it is wonderful being able to adjust and change those based on current needs.
In fact, I'll elaborate just on that, because this comes from the store level. A lot of these changes to easily, that when the store has an issue with a late truck, with a short on truck, that when they go into the FSIM, they log in, they can easily identify what the problem is, quick drop down box. They're able to get out in a fast amount of time. And initially that's one of the learning curves, is that, it's not 30 seconds in the beginning, but we wanted to be able to speak their language. So that's what we've done when we kind of changed some of the descriptions and such.
Great. Thank you for digging in on that front. Any other words of wisdom before we see if there are some other questions to answer and start to get to wrap up?
All right. I guess I'll just say quickly, I think the question I had going into this was, how am I going to onboard 900 restaurants and 8 distribution centers? So we did it by doing it one distribution center at a time. Give it about a 4-week cure period, then we would move on to the next, and basically a number of stores. And I can share that initially, there were definitely some pushbacks. It was kind of a love-hate thing. Some stores immediately just like, this is the best thing ever. Thank goodness I don't have to chase down emails and phone calls. Others was, hey, I missed my favorite customer service rep. Can I just keep calling them? And, I had to, not initially, but eventually, no, we need the data. We need you to use this. And then on the franchisee side, I will say there was a lot more. They were all for it, because they're the ones that are paying the bills. So they're the ones wanting to make sure that they're getting their credits.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the same with the distributors and suppliers. It's a learning curve, but once they figured it out, then adoption became easier. Now it's just part of the routine.
Great. Well, thank you for that. If we could look at the next slide, please. I think what I'd like to do before we wrap up with final Q&A is just provide some context in terms of how this solution fits into the broader framework for how Zaxby's and others are tackling these. So you've heard along the way mention of trying to make sure that some of these problems get resolved before they ever hit the restaurant. So FSIM kind of starts at that point where there's an issue, it's hitting the restaurant itself. We need to get to corrective action. But all of our customers are utilizing our DC inventory alerting process to get warnings of potential stockouts at the DC and work with those partners to take action as early as possible. As part of that, we're working with a number of customers around substitutions tracking and actually looking at some new features to bring to the table to help there, because that's an area of crisis today. There are so many product substitutions going on. A relatively new product for us is supplier inventory visibility. So extending that visibility back beyond just what's at the DC to what's at the supplier plant and shipping locations and what their production plans are. So that as you're examining a particular issue and not just correcting what's going on today, but trying to correct it for the next several weeks, you can get some forewarning about what's available and what will be available at the supplier. That's becoming an area of deep interest as the problems have become more widespread. And then finally, we talked a little bit about prevention earlier and lining up secondary suppliers. So we have a part of our tool set called Supplier Discovery that is the industry's only food service specific supplier research tool that lets you dive in and know what types of product the suppliers are selling, how that correlates to your own spend, and then use supplier inquiry to actually reach out to them, to run broad-based surveys, to find potential new partners or just additional capacity that you need to add to the mix. So we're helping our customers on a lot of different levels and layers of the supply chain to grapple with these issues that are going on today. And certainly I recommend if anyone who's watching or listening wants to explore further in some of those areas, please just reach out and let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we close it out on the last slide here, the important thing for us is to remember that we are all part of the same community, right? We're trying to solve the problems together. Unlike problems that are limited to inside of the four walls of an organization, which you can argue you have a bit more control of, when these are extra price problems, right? You have so many partners in the chain that actually fulfills this. The complexity takes on its own unique flavor, and the only way we're going to solve this is by collaborating together, by sharing the data, by looking at visibility from end to end, which essentially is a collective exercise, right? Which is what ArrowStream is trying to facilitate with our customers over here. So I'm going to look for one last set of questions if we have any for the stragglers that we haven't asked, and let me just see if there's a few more here. I think you talked a little bit, Steve, on restaurant level adoption. You talked about distributors and suppliers as well. Yeah, one, I guess, last question for you, Steve, right, which is coming up here is, will you be using FSIM in the same way once we get back to normal in the industry? I know you already said you don't know what normal is, but do you expect this to suddenly stop working when everything goes back to normal?
Yeah, definitely. And I could not think about going back to chasing emails and chasing phone calls, and let alone one of the initial things that drove my interest in this was often I was the one getting the phone call from somebody's having distributor delivery issues, whatever. I'm finding out stuff that happened a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, and needed a tool that we knew what was going on now, that operated in much more real time. So no, I wouldn't want to go back to those days.
Wonderful. All right, with that, I think we're at a very crisp 45-minute session today. Hopefully, all of you viewers and listeners, you found this incredibly valuable, as I did. So thank you, Steve, Michelle, and Bill, for taking us through the FSIM journey. And of course, you can always reach out to us at ArrowStream to help you as you're considering something like this. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.